What's going on, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the 415ers podcast, as always, with the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network with 95.7 The Game. Coming at you twice a week here in the off season. That's Marc, Grandi. I'm Evan Giddings. We're going to be getting into some Brock Purdy updates. We got kind of a funny, comedic, humorous rumor that we can play around with later in the episode. We're also going to discuss something that Marc brought up on our last episode that was essentially confirmed by a very prominent ESPN voice. But before we dive head in, Marc, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. Good weekend, but pumped to be back for another week of the 415ers. I know we're kind of at a dead period of the NFL right now, but we're getting a little bit of news here or there. I think for most NFL teams, Evan, training camps open right around the 26th of July. So we're like officially 1 month out from training camp. The Niners will probably likely have some news come out there because we'll probably continue to get Brock Purdy updates and so on and so forth. So I'm looking forward to that. We're inching closer, but overall, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's nice to be able to kind of relock back in on the Bay Area wider sports scene, football, of course, included. Had the chance to get out to Stockton to do a couple of broadcasts for the A's A-ball affiliate, and they were playing the San Jose Giants. So that was fun to be able to see, ideally, the next, kind of phase or chapter of Bay Area baseball, even if the A's are probably going to be playing somewhere else. But that was fun.
You got to talk to the next Shohei Ohtani, huh? Okay. Am I right?
you wish.
You're right. I do wish.
He's talking about Reggie Crawford, who was the 2022 first-round pick for the Giants out of UConn, who is one of the most unique prospects across the game because of his ability to throw 100-mile-per-hour fastball as well as hit 450 feet home runs like Shohei Ohtani. But I hate to break it to you, Marc. He only plays once a week in the field and only pitches once a week on the mound. So you might have to pump your brakes if you're going to throw his name into the Ohtani ring.
Yeah, and you could say that about literally anyone on the face of the earth. No one else is Shohei Ohtani. So I'm just trying to have a little bit of fun. But yes, I agree with you 100%.
No, I got you. No one else, by the way, is also Brock Purdy, because right now Brock Purdy is one of the more unique, I think, kind of, not necessarily like comeback stories, but obviously he's returning from injury right now. We got an update earlier today as we're recording this on Monday. If you're listening on Tuesday morning, we very much appreciate it. Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, insider for them, reported today that Brock Purdy is headed to Jacksonville. Don't worry, not in a trade, although I feel like based on the headlines, any quarterback name with the 49ers involved in heading somewhere seems like it's just going to be a trade. But he's throwing in the next couple of weeks with his quarterback coach, Will Hewlett, and an orthopedist specialist. Just another sign that Brock Purdy is progressing through his rehab following elbow surgery, remains on track for the start of the 2023 season, week 1, September 10th, against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's big, good news for the 49ers. We've been talking about it every once in a while over the last couple of months. I mean, it's been 3.5 months since Brock Purdy had the surgery. He ended up getting that surgery on March 10th. And he's been throwing for nearly an entire month now. And it seems like this is the next step. Again, this is kind of a dead period for NFL teams, at least in terms of having their hands on their players. So Brock Purdy, I'm sure, with, confirmation and the 49ers allowing him, and it's probably something they both agreed to. Brock Purdy is going out on his own with his own quarterback coach and with his own medical specialists, and, continuing to throw. So it's obviously a step forward. And it seems like Brock Purdy is just absolutely blowing his rehab out of the water. I mean, again, you remember he was expected to start throwing again after 3 months. That was the benchmark. And 3 months was about 2 weeks ago, a little more than 2 weeks ago. He was throwing a couple of weeks before that. So he is, not only is he ahead of schedule, but him being ahead of schedule, obviously, I mean, they're not pushing him, to a place where he shouldn't. But him being ahead of schedule, he still hasn't met any kind of setback. Sometimes you see, he reached this benchmark before we were expecting, but then you read a week later, and now we got to shut him down for a week, and he's kind of back to on schedule. That hasn't happened yet, so it's all good news on the Brock Purdy front for now. There's still a lot of roadblocks and hurdles he has to clear. I think the biggest one is when you finally reintroduce contact. How is the elbow going to hold up with the threat of contact? And when contact finally does happen again? But for the time being, Evan, there's absolutely no complaints. At least there shouldn't be. He is hitting every benchmark well before we expected it. And if things continue on this pace, it seems like there shouldn't be much of an issue for him being physically cleared for week one.
Yeah, I think it's a great sign, and it's just another check mark on the box of Brock Purdy to get him back to the field and get him back to where he should be, quite honestly, which is quarterback one for the San Francisco 49ers, because I believe that the Niners have a great season ahead of them. I believe that it has to do with which we'll discuss in just a little bit, the surrounding pieces for Brock Purdy. But everything appears to be that he's right on track. The one place that I kind of was thinking about based on our last conversation about the quarterbacks and kind of going through each and every one of them. And this doesn't surprise me, by the way, the update from Pelissero about Purdy being online and, heading down to Jacksonville, I guess, was maybe a place not many expected, but he had to throw somewhere. And I don't know, Mark. Like, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with just the injury, but I want to ask you this question because I've been kind of sitting on it for a little bit. Am I crazy to think that Brock Purdy is going to regress in 2023?
I feel like that's a loaded question. I don't think it's necessarily crazy because I was kind of running through Shanahan quarterbacks in my mind, and obviously the biggest one is Jimmy Garoppolo. But even to a lesser extent, you think maybe Nick Mullins. I mean, guys who have had actual run as 49er quarterbacks under Kyle Shanahan. And what have almost all of them done, Evan? They've all almost come out of the gate firing. I mean, you remember Jimmy Garoppolo's first 5 starts after the team acquired him and after, was it Brian Hoyer or was it Blaine Gabb, whoever it was, goes down with an injury, and Jimmy Garoppolo steps in when Kyle Shanahan had said earlier, this playbook is extremely complicated. We don't need you to play now. We're going to get you ready for next season. And then the quarterbacks go down injured. Jimmy gets thrown into the fire and goes 5-0 with a really, really bad team against some playoff teams towards the final stretch of that season. And then how did the rest of Jimmy's career go? We all know he never really seemed to capture that kind of flame once again. There was like the crazy stat, like first 12 career starts or whatever it was. Nick Mullins is up there with Patrick freaking Mahomes in terms of like the most efficient quarterbacks in their first whatever career starts. So I won't lie to you. That thought has kind of happened to me too. It's been in my head. It would be seemingly following a structure, a pattern for Kyle Shanahan, 49ers quarterbacks, if Brock Purdy were to struggle or at least not reach the level he was at initially last year. I think it's a little different because Brock Purdy was a rookie last year. Jimmy Garoppolo had been in the league for a while, had played some games, had started some games. But I would be lying if I said that thought wasn't in my head at some point either, because it's kind of how Shanahan quarterbacks have gone under the 49ers.
Well, that's something I hadn't honestly considered, but now I feel even more firm in my belief after hearing your explanation about the regression of Shanahan quarterbacks, because I am just simply basing this off of, one, the fact that he's returning from injury, but two, I don't think people understand how high of a bar Brock Purdy set for himself and future 49ers young quarterbacks last season across his regular season starts. Brock Purdy had a just north completion percentage of 67. That would put him in essentially the top 10 of qualified quarterbacks last year. And I don't want to extrapolate the touchdown numbers because I think that's a little unfair. And I also believe it's a product of the offense surrounding him.
Mm-hmm.
But those numbers across a 17-game season, should he stay healthy, would also undoubtedly be in the top 10 conservatively. His overall quarterback rating was about 107.5. That's a number that was better than any other quarterback over an entire season. That is utterly ridiculous. And so for me to believe that Brock Purdy could continue that over 17 games, leave out the fact that he's returning from elbow surgery, leave out the fact that Kyle Shanahan has gotten his quarterbacks, whether it's his fault or unluckiness or, whatever you want to call it, unfortunate circumstances have had his quarterbacks hurt. Leave that aside. I just feel like Brock Purdy, what he did last year, flew under the radar of how unbelievably efficient he was under center for the 49ers, largely because of the offense that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But I don't believe that it's even fair to think that he can do that again if he stays healthy for an entire season, just because what he did was unprecedented, not only just as a rookie, but as a first-year quarterback. And to be able to do it under those kind of bright lights and expectations that were virtually none last season, I think next year we are going to expect something from Brock Purdy that I don't believe it's fair to even think that he can deliver on. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, he definitely has the burden of expectations now. I mean, there was absolutely no pressure on him last year. Okay, there was pressure on that he had a good team, but it's not like there was anyone out there expecting, this guy's now going to lead us to a Super Bowl. There was nothing last year in that regard for Brock Purdy, but now he's gone out there and proven that he's a pretty good quarterback. At least it looked like it last regular season and even into the postseason before, of course, that terrible game in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. So there's that. I think I would maybe push back if he had a healthy offseason, but because he doesn't even have an offseason after a wild rookie year to actually go out and physically try to work on and fix some things. Of course, he's looking at tape, figuring out his footwork, just not doing a lot of arm work. But I mean, you're a quarterback. That's your most important asset is your arm and your ability to throw the ball. So the fact that he hasn't been able to physically work on those things, at least not nearly as much as you would if you had an entirely healthy offseason, that does worry me a little bit. One thing I will also say, Evan, I won't say the 49ers are slump proof at the quarterback position, but they don't need him to be as good as he was during that stretch to end the regular season either. I mean, this was a Niners team who went undefeated in Brock Purdy starts, and a lot of them were dominant wins. I mean, the Raiders win was pretty close. There were, some moments where maybe they started a little bit slow and you wanted them to come out firing better early in the game, whatever. But a lot of those wins were relatively comfortable. So the 49ers maybe are a little bit of Brock Purdy regression proof, I would say. Perhaps, I don't know, you could also make the case the roster is better this year around Brock Purdy. When you add in Javon Hargrave, I know there were some losses elsewhere, specifically in the defensive secondary with Jimmy Ward and all of that. You could make that case. But considering just how elite the team was with Brock Purdy last year, I don't think he needs to be every bit of the quarterback he was during that stretch. Of course, they would like it and they want him to improve and they want him to get better. But perhaps this team is still, 12 wins, even with maybe a slightly lesser Brock Purdy at quarterback. I don't know.